So we had some technical difficulties. We're back. Part one, I'll call it part one, is on Omally Live right now. You can see that. We had some issues with the internet connection here, but I do believe we have it corrected now. So this will be part two with Ivan McClay, and we were discussing Bitcoin. We were discussing some of the things that are going on in China as far as their social credit score and having an actual like credit score as far as money goes. So
Right.
go ahead and pick up where.
So I forget what we were talking about, how we were getting to it. But the point I was going to bring up
Okay.
is the major puzzle piece that kind of brought this all together, in my mind at least, might happen, might not. But what brought together was the fact that I'm looking at a bunch of corporations, like big, huge multi-million billion dollar industries building cities,
Right.
which to me is very unusual. For one, why? Like people with money don't spend money because they're nice, and people without money don't spend money because they're nice. No one spends money because they want to be nice.
Right.
So when I see people, like, I just Google companies building city. So right here we got, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see my screen?
I can bring it up over here, maybe.
But
There.
what's on my screen is important, really. But you guys
Yeah,
can do the
I
research
have it.
yourself.
Yep.
But Facebook is making a city. We looking right here. We can see that one. Amazon's making a city. Google's making a city. Is it Google making city? I forgot. Yeah, I can spell, guys. I promise. But like Google's making a city.
Sure.
Who else is making a city? Akon the rapper
Right.
is making a city. Why is Akon the rapper spending $6 billion on a city?
Right.
I mean, like, I know most people don't think Akon is a smart businessman, but I know if I'm not a smart businessman, I have lots of smart businessmen holding on to my money, or at least overseeing how I spend $6 billion.
Right.
So the point I'm trying to bring is there's a reason why people are investing billions of dollars in building cities that are in places that are in the middle of nowhere. When I say in the middle of nowhere, Akon's building his in Africa.
Right.
Tesla built theirs in the middle of a desert. Google's building theirs in the middle of another desert.
Right.
A lot of companies are building things in deserts. And that was the piece that brought it all together to me, because I was like, okay, well, if any land is valuable, you can just put a city in the desert. Why wouldn't you? You
Right.
can build a road to a desert pretty easily. All the infrastructure is on the desert. Now, here's how I see the world kind of moving towards.
Okay.
And then I'll start giving examples in real life that if you have this kind of like lens, it kind of makes sense. So I see the world moving away from big corporate, big city, and towards small community, smaller. Everything's smaller. Everything's getting smaller. And I see that in every industry that we can talk about. Like, we can just point out things. So in my mind, I'm seeing this and I'm thinking, how does this relate to history? Have we ever had anything like this in history? Most people would be like, well, no, this has never happened. We never had an influx of small communities. And
Right.
I kind of disagree to a point, because, like, if you remember in history, kings and queens had control of an area. That area was controlled by lords, and those lords controlled peasants. So
Right.
if you think about it in that perspective, moving from a big city like New York to Google's fucking little nice, sorry I said fucking, but moving to Google's nice little community, gated community, how much different is that from a royal system where,
Right.
yes, the government is here for sure. I'm not saying the government's going away. Maybe it will, maybe it won't later. But even if it does stay around, Google is making the city. Like, it puts up the street, it puts up all these things. And how that's a huge difference in my mind is because, for instance, I'll use Tesla again. I'll use Elon Musk. He is building a city. And in his city, it would be in his best interest just to give out free electricity. Here's why. Because, like we said earlier, it costs next to nothing now to give out electricity. You can use electricity for so many reasons, and it provides so many avenues of resources of money.
Right.
So if Elon Musk builds a whole city, he can control how the whole city's set up. So he can make a whole city dependent on electricity. Why is that
Right.
important? Because he has a car line that runs on electricity.
Right.
Because he has smart home things that run on everything he's doing is electric based. So him building a city is probably the most profitable thing he can do because he's creating a demand for his supply.
Right. I was going to say he sort of controls both ends of the
Yes.
economic standard. Can you switch back to the your camera?
This
There we go. Yep. So, um, oops, I know what I'm doing. Uh, but no, I think so. And so then you have to sort of ask the question of do we do we actually have um, let's say a new, for lack of better words, a new government forming with the actual owner of the city versus, let's say the United States of America. You know
And
what
I
I
know
mean?
exactly what you're trying to say. I've been trying to work that out for so long. Is there going to be a government in this age where Tesla rules the city? Is
Right.
that what you're trying to get to?
Yes. And because let's face it, we're even starting to see some of it now as far as uh, cancel culture.
Yes.
Now you have the corporations dictating, who the winners and losers are versus a person's own, their own equity as far as what they provide.
Mm-hmm.
You can take someone, you know, you, pretty much anybody now that's tied to a digital age, and if they don't fall in line with Facebook or Google or whatnot, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you can get
They're an
shut.
outcast.
Yeah, you're an outcast, and if your entire business or the majority of your business is online or digital, I mean, they can shut you down in a heartbeat.
Yes.
So,
It gives a huge power to corporations. And
right,
like, there's a lot of people who will be like, oh, Google isn't too bad. They treat their employees really well. And like, there's a reason for that. Google doesn't pay their employees really well, doesn't treat their employees really well. It doesn't provide all those nice little services you see on the internet because it wants to. It
right,
has to. If you look at the transfer rate of people of those industries in Silicon Valley,
right,
it's ridiculous. If you don't treat them well, they leave in a week. Like,
right,
you got these guys getting paid millions of dollars, and if you don't give them a coffee break every 3 hours, they leave.
right,
Like, you have to accommodate these ridiculous claims because there's such a demand and there's such a low supply and such a high demand. So what Google is doing with this city is they're consolidating that
consolidating,
word. Yeah, that
right,
word. They're doing that with their employees. If you build a city in the middle of nowhere and all your employees live there, well, why would they move? Now
right,
they're leaving their friends, their family. If everything you have is associated with work, to transfer corporation means you have to pretty much enter witness protection and leave your life,
right,
you know?
yeah, and and
So,
and that creates, sort of a whole different, because like you take the United States right now, we have a constitution, we have laws, we have states. We're actually the United States of America. Each state has its own government, it has a government or a governor, a judicial system, blah blah blah. So, and we actually have the ability to vote.
yeah,
But once a corporation builds the city, where is it business policy, or is it a government and a constitution that actually runs the inside of the city?
that is a very good question
I mean,
because at
not
one
not
end, you're
not to go too far down a rabbit hole, but I mean, you can see where,
the implications, the
right.
legal issues, the
Well,
human rights issues.
human rights would be, oh my. I mean, you,
Hmm.
you hate to, go down that dark path, but I mean, you could see sort of a resurgence of the Middle Ages.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think it's ever going to get back down to the point where it's like a small, like, village town on like a Google map, like, definition.
Right.
I see, like, 50,000 people towns becoming quite like common because, like, realistically, what can't you do in a small community that you can do in a big one?
right.
Now,
Well,
uh, okay.
and I hate to use the C word because YouTube tends to push those back, but in a pandemic, let's say, living one on top of the other in some of these bigger cities, I mean, we're starting to see where that has huge negative
Mhm.
ramifications. I mean, let's face it. If you look at places like New York City and San Francisco, whatnot, versus Beach City.
Yeah,
I mean, there's like you said, there's no reason to have packed places like that anymore.
none.
It's
It used to be
actually
practically practical, but now
right.
it's like
Sure.
less efficient, more costly. Same word, but
Yeah.
it's just not reasonable. And sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
So yeah, yeah. Looking at it now from the outside is okay. If you see things heading that direction, and
Hmm.
you want a positive um, outcome or a positive move forward, and you're looking to invest money,
Hmm.
where do you put it?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because I'm not going to say you should invest in this company or that, but like in general ideas of like industries I've been looking at and my rationale behind it. The first thing I think is like a game changing invention, I guess you could say. Like when you look at in like eras in history, like the era of the car changed everything.
Right.
Now you weren't limited by the horse and what it could do. You were limited by how much gas you can hold.
Right.
So the next one of the big changers, almost as much as the internet, I think, in my opinion, is 3D printers.
Yep.
So 3D printers, like people understand that as a game changer, but I don't think they realize how much of a game changer that is when you connect it with everything we have going on today. So I'll give you an example of something that's happening in the real world today. So there's a corporation, I forget what it's called, you can Google it, but we'll just call it Company A. Company A has warehouses on every continent except Antarctica. It has
Mm-hmm.
warehouses of just 3D printing factories. It's just a big office space full of 3D printers. And
Right.
in the back, they just have scrap metal. No actual materials, nothing of use. They just have metal and 3D printers. That's it. Now, what they do special is from they'll receive an order from wherever. Say you're in you're in Budapest or you're in Canada. Doesn't matter.
Right.
What they'll do is they'll contact their nearest warehouse to you, tell them to mass produce whatever part you're needing out of the 3D printer. So if you need a bunch of lug nuts and bolts, they'll mass produce it on the spot and then ship it to you within 48 hours. So
Right.
instead of waiting for Amazon shipping 7 to 10 days to get whatever you need from China, the corporation that's right down the road is building it in their backyard and sending it to you
Sure.
for half the cost, half the time, half everything.
Right.
It's considerably cheaper to just have 3D printers and make what you need on demand versus housing, storing, all these other things. So that in itself, you can see how much of a game changer it is for trade. I
Sure.
don't need product. I need 3D printers and ability to trade with this free service of the internet.
Right. And you're cutting times.
So many things are getting reduced just because of that one change of industry.
Right. And the thing is, even 5, 10 years ago, a 3D printer was something that wasn't very affordable.
No.
But the longer something's around, the more affordable it becomes. So let's say you do have a printer and
Mm-hmm.
something breaks. Not heck, you can make it yourself as long as you can scan it and
Mm-hmm.
print it. Um, you know, now you don't even have to go to the store to get parts. You can make them yourself,
Yes.
and in a very short period of time.
Faster than you can buy it most of the times.
Yep. So and that's a friend of mine got into laser engraving,
Mm-hmm.
and where it used to be you had to take something somewhere, tell them what you want on it. They would say come back in a week, you can get
Yeah,
it.
5 to 10 business days.
$300 you can get a laser engraver and you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
Pay
and
me
it,
500, I'll give it to you in an hour.
right. That's and I think again things that are more localized
Mm-hmm.
are going to grow. You know, speaking of things that changed, when everything was radio and
Mm-hmm.
TV first come about, everybody said, TV's a fad. It's not going to make it. You know, the television set's too expensive, blah blah blah. And the people that didn't adjust and make the leap from radio to TV, they got lost.
Yeah.
You look at radio now. I mean, it's something people with older cars turn on. You either have satellite or you're hooking your phone up to
Yeah.
your car, and
You're right.
right,
There's a song about that. TV killed the radio.
right. So
Yeah.
then you fast forward to the 90s, and I can remember people saying, in like 95, 96, and they were sending out these little CDs with AOL time on it. And everybody
Yeah.
said, it's a big fad,
It's gonna go
it's going to
away.
pass, it's going to go away. And well, at the same time people were saying that, I found eBay. And the amount of money that I've made on eBay is it's
It's
amazing.
nice.
Right. And the thing is, you're paying for an internet service,
Hmm.
right? Somebody else already built the site. Matter of fact, at the time, this tell you, I'm going to date myself a little bit. I actually spent a lot of money on a scanner because I was taking pictures of what I was going to sell, getting the film developed, and then scanning the picture so I could upload it to eBay. So, and
That's
back
funny because I remember seeing a bunch of pictures of stuff. I could never figure out why. Just around the house, I was like, why do we
right,
have so many pictures of junk?
right, and that was stuff that was stuff that was being sold on eBay, and when you look at where things have come from there, I mean, now you just snap a quick picture of it with your cell phone because the quality is incredible compared to what it was back then. And I mean, you can run a whole eBay store from your
Yes.
phone, you know.
Yes.
So
Let me
the
give you another situation of just how amazing these things are. Is I can have my bank tell your bank to send someone in China money, so someone in China can send my girlfriend, whatever gift card that I want.
right, and that
That's amazing.
and
And I can
and,
do that from my classroom on my laptop
and
or
what's
my phone.
and you don't even have to physically talk to somebody,
No, there is
and
no reason you have to leave your house if you don't want to.
right,
You have money.
right. I was
Well, you
gonna
can make money and then never leave your house.
right, and you know, sort of going off rail a little bit, I think this past year has really shown how much people would more rely on a good internet connection than a good car.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I got into live streaming just as sort of a hobby, but in March of last year, my phone rang a lot because everybody's like, "How do you do that?" Because that's how I have to conduct business now,
Mm-hmm.
and it sort of
Yeah,
takes off.
COVID changed a lot of things, and that was a
Mm,
game changer. COVID, that was one of the things I was like, yeah, there's no reason we can go to a bigger corporation system because things like COVID changed everything. And we saw that like everything we've done, let me put it in perspective. In a course of 3 or 4 weeks, our entire country switched economies,
right.
like economic systems.
Yep.
So we all went from in-person to digital in a course of 3 weeks without going bankrupt or collapse. Now, to give perspective how amazing that actually is on a governmental level, the 9/11 tax,
Mm-hmm.
the things that were like the last breaking change in the U.S., the war on terror, the thing that pretty much associates how we live today,
Right.
took about 4 or 5 months for us to react.
Right.
Between us getting attacked with the planes, that this whole stage attack, and us
Right.
putting boots on the ground
Right.
was about 4 or 5 months, and
Right.
that's in my opinion quite simpler than changing an entire country over to a different form of economy.
Right.
Now, we did that in 3 weeks with relatively no downside. I mean, like the economy did dip for sure, but like the fact that like we're not all eating like our cats and stuff should tell
Right.
you, like
Right.
this is something that is going to happen. Doesn't make sense. Like this transition, it was so seamless in 3 weeks that our entire country, entire
Sure.
world did it.
Well, in the course of that time, we showed that you don't even need school buildings anymore.
No, what? No.
You know and I think you know that when we see that part, look at how many people work from home now.
Mm-hmm.
I
It's
mean,
cheaper.
it's a year later. Things are sort of smoothing out. Some states are reopening, whatnot. The amount of people that can work from home,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's much
Hard.
more efficient and cheap for me to just pay you a stipend for your internet connection
Right.
than to pay for lights and contracts with printers.
Toilets,
Right,
janitors,
right,
yeah, printers. Like, there's so many expenses to running a business in a
sure,
physical realm. But if you're at home, I don't have to pay for your house. I just got to pay for your internet and the laptop you use. That's
right,
government property, or that's company property.
property, right. And the thing is, that's cheap
Oh,
compared
dirt cheap. I can give
compared
you a
to
Chromebook for $50.
right, right. But no, I do, and the more that I sort of operate in this digital realm, you see things and you're like, why aren't people doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's a cause. For almost a decade, I always said, wouldn't it be cheaper just to give a kid a laptop and tell him to stay at home?
Mm-hmm.
But there was nothing to push it there.
Yes.
People get so used to, well, you get on a school bus, you go to school, you go there, you go to
People like
class.
tradition.
Yep. And once they were put in a position where they were forced to change, I mean, now, like I said, sky's the limit.
Yes.
We even, I can remember I was covering a city council meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and the council president, this is pre COVID, she mentioned attending the council meetings via computer, like Skype.
Mm-hmm.
And this was probably, well, it was right before the election cycle, so it would have been a year out from the pandemic. And the council, they didn't really want to have anything to do with that. They're like, that'll be it's going to cost money. People will use it as an excuse not to be there. Blah blah blah. This, that, and the
Yep.
other.
Yep.
And next thing you know, COVID happens,
Now
and
people are fighting hand over fist to get that program.
well, now they do things through WebEx, Zoom, stuff like that. They've changed around the council chambers to the point where you can either be there in person or you can attend.
Right.
So
Do
it
you want
ended
to
up
come or you just want to show up?
right. So it ended up happening regardless.
Yeah.
So I think, well, like I said, the necessity came from a very big push.
Yes. And it's not limited to just certain topics. I feel like this is every industry. And by that, I can give examples in every industry. And people are like, well, they always try to think of examples like, well, what about this one? What about this one? Well, one of the hardest ones for me to figure out was actually farming. Like, how does farming equivalent to a smaller community? How do you, because farming, you need more space. Everything for farming, when you grow a population, has to be bigger in theory, or you have to be more efficient. And we've been doing farming for a while, so it's pretty efficient. Now, they have been working with like greenhouses and using more efficient land. For sure, that's one avenue that it could take. The avenue I'm looking at, which involves what we're talking about, is involves a auction farmer that I saw on, I forget where, but this lady, this girl, she's 20 some years old. She's a millionaire. But what her business is she has an app on her phone where she auctions cows. And like it's really big in like Minnesota or Texas. I forget where this girl is from, but she's in the cut. Like she's in a desert. Like she's only surrounded by farmland and corn, and like there's nothing around her.
Right.
And she said that she started on Facebook Marketplace selling cows, and that eventually like upgraded to the point where now she's a CEO of some app corporation, and she's making $1 million auctioning cows over apps. So if I can do that with a cow, I don't feel like there's any industry that
Right.
I can't just incorporate a free model and a free internet access to.
Right.
Now, now a lot of people, after they get tired of arguing which industries can't be affected and which ones can, then they start talking about other things. So I just start pointing out things that kind of direct my argument, or at least like if you have this lens, it makes sense for this argument. So one of the big things we just saw was with Texas's power outage.
Right.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm ready. You still
All right.
recording?
Yep.
So I could argue for a lot of industries. I can argue like this is how this is changing for a smaller community. This is how this is progressing towards smaller and smaller. I can do that for just about any industry. We've done it for school. We've done it for farming. We've done it for, I forget what else we've done it for so far. But past that, I started looking at other trends, you know, past the corporate level. What about the personal individual level? So this upcoming generation, mine included and past, or like younger,
Mm-hmm.
we're not known for being socially adept. You
Right.
know, all awkward as fuck. We're all
Right.
awkward.
Right.
So how does that play into a small community?
Right.
Well, when you're socially awkward, when you're just like not a very talkative, when you only have a small group of friends, why would
Mm-hmm.
you go to a big city? What about that appeals to you?
Right.
So like as a stereotype, our generation isn't very sociable, so it would make sense to not go to a big city. On top of that, it doesn't make sense for me personally, financially, to move to a big city. It's almost impossible for me to own a house. And if I do own a house, it's not going to be in a big city. For one, that's impossible. It's going to be in a mid-sized city, and it's going to be expensive. Like my
Right.
friends, like who are buying houses currently, you know, they're single two family, like they're two income families trying to pay for $100,000 house. That's, you know, just two bedrooms, one bath.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's not a bad house, but at the same time, like I feel like I can spend $100,000 on a lot.
More.
Yeah, on more
Right.
is what I'm trying to say. So it's not practical to move into cities already established. It's expensive as hell. And
Mm-hmm.
with how things are going as far as pay rates and how the money's working, for my generation, college scholarships and all these other problems we're having, all these other topics people are discussing, there is no reason for me to go to a city as much as there is to go to a smaller community. If
Right.
I am a college graduate with a doctorate degree, what are the chances of me getting a job as a doctor in New York City versus the community in Nevada who doesn't have a doctor?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
people think because of they're coming from these big areas that like everyone has doctors. No, there's lots of areas in the US that don't have doctors, and it's like 3 counties to one doctor. You know, I
Right.
mean, the county is only, you know, 5,000 people, but
Right.
realistically, if you want to go to the doctor, you got to drive an hour.
Right.
And
Eh,
that's with a lot of industries. Like it's so much easier to do whatever you want in a smaller city than it is at New York, than it is in Chicago. And
Right.
you can have the same results anywhere if you can establish it with the internet.
Sure.
So why would you?
Right. I was gonna say, and the thing is, and you're starting to see it with.
Yeah, there's a huge trend of, was it migration outwards?
Right. Sure. And I was just gonna touch on that. Even Joe Rogan, he left California. He'd been a lifelong
Mm.
California person. He's in Texas now. You know, what's crazy is not only are people migrating, but they're migrating to certain places with a quickness, and a lot of it is fiscal. I mean,
Yes.
it
Right now, I can buy 40, like I'm literally looking this up right now. I'm looking at buying 40 acres of land in Nevada, and I'm looking at buying like 5 or so acres in Colorado for about 5 grand
right,
for 40 acres for five. But either way, that
right,
is considerably better than the $100,000 I got paid for the 0.25 acreage of land that I've looked in
right,
Pennsylvania, you know,
right.
next to a city.
And some will make the comment, well, what's there? And the fact of the matter is, you don't really, if you, like you said, if you can get a power supply and an internet connection,
Hmm.
it doesn't matter if you're on the side of a mountain. You know,
Exactly.
the it, it the, the
And
where is becoming less relevant.
yes, and that's the only reason why we haven't colonized, or I want to say colonized, but no, don't know.
Populated those areas.
Yes, thank you. But fuck, I thought. Oh, what were you saying?
About populating areas where maybe where before, like, let's say if you take this a real hilly area, and
Mm-hmm. All right.
it's not very as accessible for industry that we had in the past. Now, if
Mm-hmm.
you can supply it with an internet connection and power, I mean, it can be a thriving business.
Yes, and most people, and like when I talk about this, a lot of reservations people have is like, well, it would cost a lot of money to put all this infrastructure in the area. Like you're talking about, the only thing I need is power. Well, I don't want to pay the power company to run power lines to me.
Right.
Well, my counter argument to that has always been like, it's actually cheaper now today to just buy a solar panel than it is to establish yourself in an already connected fucking electrical system that you're part of.
Right.
Not only is it cheaper to connect to a solar panel, it's cheaper, it's more efficient, and you don't have to pay anyone else. And it's decentralized. Why that's important is because the war on terror, another reason why we're going smaller is because the war on terror, it's a lot riskier to have one big city than a bunch of smaller cities that are interconnected.
Right.
Like if we have a bunch of small cities, it doesn't change how much business we can conduct,
Right.
but it does change how much damage you can do to one spot. You know,
Right.
you blow up the entire city with a nuke, well, that's only one city
Right.
versus the entire chain. If you blow up New York City with a nuke, that's half, like not half, but that's a significant part of our economy in
Right.
one shot just with one nuke.
Right.
Now, that's an extreme example, but the same thing can be said with like a plane or whatever terrorist plot you're thinking of.
Right. Well, and I think too, as far as having a grid goes, with putting a cell tower in now is way more reasonable of a solution than actually running like internet lines and whatnot. And with and I just have a 4G phone. I can use my
Hmm.
my phone as a hotspot for my computer, and I will get better internet connection than certain parts of town.
Yes.
So, you know, there's so many workarounds, whether it's solar, wind,
All of
inter
which are cheap.
right,
They were
and
expensive, which is why we didn't use them.
right,
Now it's cheap, and you can use it to reproduce itself
sure,
cheaply.
and I think the more people are creative with how they use that stuff, whether it's the solar or the internet connection, cheap land, like you said. Once upon a time, you know, if you needed office space to run a business,
Exactly. Not
well,
anymore.
well now people have a place that they're going to live. That is their office. So you just connect those people with a software or an app, and now you have a business via, I mean, something as small as a phone.
Yes.
So I don't know. I think we live in an interesting time, and I think the past year has showed us just the tip of the iceberg as far as what our technology and infrastructure is actually capable of.
Hmm.
And other than let's say like the automotive industry, I don't know that we'll be in a time where we don't need cars,
I don't think
but
that's going
but
to happen.
but we won't need cars that go as far
I
because
see.
because that was one of the big things with Tesla and the electric cars and whatnot, places to get electric. Once that's in place, I mean, let's face it, our power grid is pretty much in place. It's just putting the right stations close enough together that you can just go wherever you need to go.
Hmm.
And nobody
Well,
likes.
with that system, so it's funny you bring that up. Our power system for the U.S. is split up in three parts.
Yep.
So left half, right half, and then
And
Texas
Texas.
opted out.
Right.
That's why they had the power outage because they opted out.
Right.
Now, what's interesting about it is with this mass electrical system, like it's not just a big system and it has like a big factory here and it just pumps all electricity and that's all the electricity New York uses. You know, New York
Right.
doesn't have one power system. What it actually has is connections to other places who don't use as much power as they produce.
Right.
So New York actually gets a lot of its energy from Canada. Um, I forget which states surround New York, but it's like the three states that are touching New York and
Sure.
Canada.
Right.
And all those together work together to power New York. Now, when you transfer over from what we have to what I think is going to be is all these recyclable and renewable energies, I think it's going to be more efficient, not only because we're just as a renewable source, but we're able to space them differently. Right
Right.
now, the system is such that like it's good for overlap, it's good for redundancy, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not a very efficient system because it needs redundancy, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yep.
Like a war on terror, if a terrorist bombed our infrastructure, we would be SOL if there was only one line. But
Mm-hmm.
if that one line only connects one city to the rest of the grid or the two lines, whatever it is, that's so much better. So
Sure.
again, that's just another reason why I think the world is moving towards smaller communities,
Right.
because there's is more efficient in every industry. It's more efficient to go smaller
Sure.
and faster.
I was going to say speed is probably the biggest push in the innovation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but, like we were talking about, whether it's laser engraving or 3D printing,
Mm-hmm.
you can increase the speed of fixing something that's broke tenfold at a tenth of the cost.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's no sense to go
Mm-hmm.
big like we used to.
Right.
But
And to
anyway,
continue, sorry, to
yeah, go ahead.
continue, another point we could argue or talk about is outside of the industrial level, the personal level is what's happening in our news. So like right now, I don't know if there actually is a divide in races or whatever, but there's definitely a lot of tension between groups, whether
Right.
it's political groups, left versus right, racial groups, whatever
Mm,
color versus whatever color, whatever you're talking about. There's a lot of tension in our community.
sure.
Now, how that would resolve is if you just didn't have to talk to those people. If I could build you a city that only housed people who thought exactly like you,
Right.
then I mean, yeah, there's people who think differently, but like more often than not, your conflicts with someone who thinks differently is on a personal level, not a macro level.
Right.
I mean, do you disagree?
I think and that would be sort of like maybe more of a Middle Ages, because we used to be 100% tribal.
Yes.
If you looked like this and thought like this, you went over here. If you looked like this and thought like this group went over here. Um, Me personally, I think part of that is ingrained in our DNA.
I do.
I think
You want to be people like you.
right, and the other part of me says going that direction is bad, because no matter how you slice it, I'm always going to be around people that are at least a little bit different than me,
Mm-hmm.
and
But
I have to find a way to somehow coexist.
and you're right. And like I don't think we'd ever get to the point where it's just like 100% like you are type A, you go here, you're type B, go here, all the way through Z. But I do see like, laws of statistics and averages. Like if you're a computer developer engineer, like chances are you have a certain kind of personality.
Right.
So when Facebook builds a city for software engineers, chances are you're surrounded by people who think pretty similar to you. So you
Sure.
may have differences within your community. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the same, but it's definitely different than the just taking two extremes. The software engineer who's making hundreds to millions of dollars versus the impoverished low-income family who's getting by on welfare. Now, today in Cleveland, I've seen it like quite literally. Houses butted up to each other, where it's like from here over on this side of the tracks is nice, here over on this side of the tracks is not.
Right.
Now, the conflict is when these two intertwine.
Right.
When these people come over here on our tracks, the cops pull them over. When these people come over here, they get robbed. Whatever
Right.
the equation.
Right.
But if you're just separated by distance, then like the problem doesn't become your personal; it becomes macro. And so far, in my experience, from what I've seen, is the policies that most people are thinking on a macro level aren't the real issues. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely things like Medicaid and things people have issues and concerns about.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to how most of our government operates, we're pretty much in agreement. We should probably try to be toward, like how many issues do we have with foreign problems? Oh, sorry. What's the word? Foreign policy.
Right.
You ever hear an African American argue with a Caucasian about how whatever president is handling foreign affairs? I mean, they probably are, but their personal issues are more local.
Right.
Where it gets heated, it becomes more local.
Right. I,
So,
you
does that
know,
make sense?
it's funny, if you talk to the average person, they very big on, they don't want a lot of government in their life.
Mm-hmm.
They would much rather be left alone and live their life than to be stood on top of.
Yes.
And I think that is generally the biggest problem between any two groups or races or opposing sides, whatever you want to call it, is which one is trying to
Get over.
establish power over the other.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's like I said, some of it is ingrained in DNA. If you take a petri dish and throw just a bunch of random cells in there, they'll align themselves from weakest to strongest. I mean, it's like that from cells to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as a society, when we force people, we don't anymore. It's not like, well, what do you think? And you people have a conversation. We live in a society now where you are forced to choose. You pick
Yes.
this one or you pick this one. And any discussion about the differences or the similarities, you're either a traitor or
Yes.
you're just a bad person or whatnot. And I think that is a solution. Having the discussion. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we let's face it. If you told let's say you're into politics and you said, "Hey, man, I'm going over to person X's house and they've got the wrong letter by their name."
Mm-hmm.
Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. The next thing you know, you're frowned upon.
Yes.
I mean,
You're the
so
bad guy. You're
yep,
them.
yep, you're right.
You're them.
You're them. All right.
And I was actually I had it's a podcast. I was listening to a podcast about this topic. It's kind of getting off hand down the rabbit hole a little bit, but there was talking about why is that? Like, why can we not just have a discussion about politics? Like, that's not normal in our history. Like, human history, that's never been. Like,
Right.
we've always been able to talk about it without causing such disruption, I guess you could say.
Right.
And they were talking about how this was influenced by pretty much technology. Technology is the reason why we can't talk about politics. The reason being is because they were using analysis of how politics were talked about through the years. And before technology, people would talk about it on radio shows, talk shows, whatever. And we would have the full discussion, hour, 2 hour, 3 hour long discussion, and viewers would tune in as the discussion went on.
Mm-hmm.
But it went from beginning to end. We did not stop and start based on your preference.
Sure.
Now, today's modern age, everyone's an expert because everyone can tune in for 5-10 minutes to give their 2 cents
Yep.
and get all the information they think they need before they leave. It's not the reason why we can't have an involved conversation is because all information you get is shallow and not deep.
Right.
No one can have a deep conversation because no one really knows much.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and then
On a macro level.
you'll see it in the big networks.
Mm-hmm.
They'll ask a very complicated question, and they'll give you 90 seconds to answer.
Yes.
Now, if you
Let me
ask,
just summarize my doctorate's thesis for you in 90 seconds.
right? Yeah, that's happy talk. That's not going to happen.
No.
Not at any meaningful level, and so another reason I started kind of moving in the direction of long form content like this, there is a place that you can have those discussions,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as they exist, I think we're doing okay.
Yes.
But once, and let's face it, everybody has that comfort zone as far as what news station they want to listen to, or
Yeah,
you
everyone
know
has their home.
their little outlet,
Mm-hmm.
right? And usually when I tell people who I listen to, they're like, "Well, why do you listen to him?" And I was like, "Well, one, if you listen to only people that think like you,
Then you'd never know when you're wrong.
you have no, yeah, there's no contrast, because
Mm-hmm.
let's face it, nobody's right 100% of the time. You always have to listen to the other side, even if you don't like hearing it. You still have to listen to it,
Mm-hmm.
and then make a decision from there. If you only listen to people that are repeating the same thing you're saying, well, there's no reason to think different.
Yeah. Why would
So
you? If 10 people in your life that you trust told you you're right, and the one person you don't like to start with tells you you're wrong because they have a different view of you,
right.
then chances are you're not going to agree with that person.
Right. So anywho, the collective time that this podcast has been up is almost an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should do this again. I
Definitely.
think I think we'll do this live, and I'm gonna do a little bit of messing with the infrastructure here in my studio, because the dropping of the internet connection is becoming very untimely.
Okay, big
so
man. No, I feel that.
so
What was I gonna
what do,
say?
what do you want to close with? What do you got?
Uh, honestly, that's pretty much it. Small
I,
communities, invest small. Airbnb's what I've been investing in.
sure.
A lot of Square and Uber, all the small things that put the power in the individuals, because I feel like the more technology evolves, the less need there is for government, and the government is not happy about that.
Right. And I'm going to leave this as a little send off to sort of get people back to the next one. Here's how I'm investing small. I've been on a carnivore diet. Tomorrow will be 90 days,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've lost 32 pounds in 3 months. And getting ready to invest in grass fed, grass finished beef, in beef that's raised here locally, and also getting pork that is grass fed, grass finished. And we have a place that we can get our eggs, like real eggs. They're all different colors from brown to like almost a teal green. I mean, they are
Mm-hmm.
real eggs from chickens that aren't raised in a building in a small box.
You're right.
And I'm going to say I've been investing in local food, and I think from a health standpoint, it would be very very good for people to reevaluate their health, especially after this past year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my thoughts, and again, I think we should probably do this. Your work season is coming to a close, so we
Mm-hmm.
could probably do this. Maybe we'll
Yeah.
when I come back, maybe we'll actually do a live one in studio. I'll have all of nobody can see on that side of the camera, but this is a hot mess over
It's over
here,
there. They don't need to see it.
right? And we'll be live and in studio, and we'll do another one.
Okay.
All right?
Yes, for sure.
That
When
my
you're done recording, I do got a couple things to
yep.
hit you with
Stay
here.
yep. Stay on the line. That, my friends, is a wrap. And until next time, stay sharp, keep a tight shot, group, and rock on. Peace.